This is part 2 of the Mexican legend, Popocatepetl and Ixtlaccihuatl. Starting where I left off on page 665. The warriors acclaimed Popo as the man most responsible for the victory, and weary though they all were, they set off for Ixtlaccihuatl to report to the emperor and for Popo to claim Ixtla as his wife at last. But a few of those warriors were jealous of Popo. Since they knew none of them could rightly claim the victory for himself, the decision among the emperor's fighting men that Popo was responsible for the victory had been unanimous. They wanted to spoil for him and for Ixtla the delights which the emperor had promised. These few men slipped away from the rest at night and made their way to Ixtlaccihuatl ahead of all the others. They reached the capital 2 days later, having traveled without sleep all the way, and quickly let it be known that although the emperor's warriors had been successful against his enemies, the warrior Popo had been killed in battle. It was a foolish and cruel life which those warriors told their... It was a foolish and cruel lie which those warriors told their emperor, and they told it for no reason other than they were jealous of Popo. When the emperor heard this, he demanded that Popo's body be brought to him so that he might arrange a fitting burial. He knew the men his daughter had loved would have died courageously. The jealous warriors looked at one another and said nothing. Then one of them told the emperor that Popo had been killed on the edge of Lake Texcoco, and that his body had fallen into the water and no man had been able to retrieve it. The emperor was saddened to hear this. After a little while, he demanded to be told which of his warriors had been responsible for the victory, but none of the fighting men before him dared claim the successful outcome of the war for himself, for each knew the others would refute him, so they remained silent. This puzzled the emperor, and he decided to wait for the main body of his warriors to return and not to press the few who had brought the news of the victory of Popo's death. Then the emperor sent for his wife and his daughter and told them their enemies had been overcome. The empress was thoroughly excited and relieved at the news. Ixtla was only apprehensive. The emperor, seeing her anxious face, told her quickly that Popo was dead. He went on to say that the warrior's body had been lost in the waters of Lake Texcoco, and again it was as though his wisdom had left him, for he spoke at some length at his not being able to tell Ixtla who her husband would be, and who would become emperor within the main body of the warriors returned to Ixtlaccihuatl. But Ixtla heard nothing of what he told her, only that her beloved Popo was dead. She went to her room and lay down. Her mother followed her and saw at once that she was very ill. Witch doctors were sent for her, but could not help the princess, and neither could her parents. Her illness had no name, unless it was the illness of a broken heart. Princess Ixtlaccihuatl did not wish to live if Popo was dead, and so she died herself. The day after her death, Popo returned to Ixtlaccihuatl with all the other surviving warriors. They went straight to the palace and with much cheering told the emperor that his enemies had been routed and that Popo was the undoubted victor of the conflict. The emperor praised his warriors and proclaimed Popo to be the new emperor in his place. When the young men asked first to see Ixtla, begging that they should be married at once before being jointly proclaimed emperor and empress, the emperor had to tell Popo of Ixtla's death and how it had happened. Popo spoke not a word. He gestured the assembled warriors to follow him, and together they sought out a few jealous men who had given the false news of his death to the emperor. With the army of warriors watching, Popo killed each one of them in single combat with his obsidian-studded club. No one tried to stop him. That task accomplished, Popo returned to the palace and, without speaking and still wearing his stiff cotton armor, went to Ixtla's room. He gently lifted her body and carried it out of the palace and out of the city, and no one tried to stop him doing that either. All the warriors followed him in silence. When he walked some miles, he gestured to them again, and they built a huge pile of stones in the shape of a pyramid. They all worked together, and they worked fast while Popo stood and watched, holding the body of the princess in his arms. By sunset, the mighty edifice was finished. Popo climbed it alone, carrying Ixtla's corpse with him. There, at the very top, under a heap of stones, he buried the young woman he had loved so well and for so long, and who had died for the love of him. That night Popo slept alone at the top of the pyramid by Ixtla's grave. In the morning he came down and spoke for the first time since the emperor had told him the princess was dead. He told the warriors to build another pyramid and a little to the southwest of the one which held Ixtla's body, and to build it higher than the other. He told them, too, to tell the emperor on his behalf that he, Popocatepetl, would never reign and rule in Ixtlaccihuatl. He would keep watch over the grave of the princess Ixtlaccihuatl for the rest of his life. The messages to the emperor were the last words Popo ever spoke. Well before the evening and second mighty piling of the stones was built, Popo climbed it and stood at the top, taking a torch of resinous pine wood with him. And when he reached the top, he lit the torch, and the warriors below saw the white smoke rise against the blue sky, and they watched as the sun began to set, and the smoke turned pink, and then a deep red, the color of blood. So Popocatepetl stood there, holding the torch in memory of Ixtlaccihuatl for the rest of his days. The snows came, and as the years went by, the pyramids of stone became high, white-capped mountains. Even now, the one called Popocatepetl emits smoke in memory of the princess whose body lies in the mountain which bears her name.